Tony? Hang on just a minute. There? Wherever you are. Give him 30 seconds notice, and we'll start. TV. Right, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for October 28, 2014. Mr. Buscarin is participating remotely due to geographical distance. Remind the Commission that means every vote has to be a roll call vote. Are there any comments or concerns about the agenda? Hearing none, it is adopted. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 14th, 2014.
I did not.
You want to wait? Postpone it till next time? All right. That. Is there a motion to ratify the warrant of October 22nd? How do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin? Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? Aye. Chair votes aye. Is there public comment? None. On to pending leases and contracts. Go through those?
There are two pending leases, JetBlue and Delta. We're working with legal. Those all we changed to the other two is extension contract amendment to extend the agreement with Jacobs for the site. Contract amendment for that is the G.
I'm going to do them separately because they're quite. Motion to approve the contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering. Second. Are there any questions or comments? Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin? Ms. Planzer? Mr. Gasparo? All right, do you want to explain a little bit about the contract amendment with Nantucket Architecture, please?
Nantucket Architecture. Second. Just some addition.
Any questions?
No.
Yes, Tony.
No questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. How do you vote, Mrs. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right, thank you. Pending matters.
On the MOU for procurement, the town has requested a red line agreement, and we sent them what we have. When I created the document, I was working off a different computer, so it's half red line and half cut and paste. So we sent that on to them, but Livia has indicated that they will be sending it to the BOS and will let us know when it is on the agenda for them. Any questions on that? On the formerly used defense site, we have a meeting scheduled for this Thursday with the impacted tenants. We just received a call before I came over that one is unable to make it, so we're going to try to schedule them in tomorrow, but I would have liked to try to get them both together because it impacts the access and what our plan is for them, but if we have to, we'll do it individually, and then we'll sit with them and discuss the change or amendment needed to their contract for their business arrangement.
Any questions? All right, GA building?
We've discussed some of the approach that we're taking for the GA building, but attached to in your packet is a draft of the reconciliation to date for the GA building. You'll also notice there are some change orders in there. There are 3 that need to be ratified based on a prior action from the commission. I approved 3 of them. They were under the amount, but we just need to ratify those. And there are some that are still in dispute. There's some of them that, may be for a certain amount, but we only agreed to a lesser amount and have paid that. So that's why we're trying to force this final reconciliation through the surety or the contractor. So that's where we are with the update, but we do need the commission to ratify the 3.
2021 and 24R.
Yes. I believe that was it.
Are there any questions on those?
I'll make a motion to ratify change orders 2021 and 24R.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further comments? Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? The chair votes aye.
Okay, and if I may add to that, too, our maintenance forces put in the sod. If you haven't seen it, it looks very nice. They put in irrigation, some drainage, did quite a bit of work, and it really does look much better and is a better product than what was actually planned. What was planned was simply the, what's it called when they spray?
Hydroseed.
Hydroseed. So it looks very nice. Unfortunately, it took us to the end of the season to get it, but we're in.
Hopefully it'll make it. All right, on Nantucket Architecture Group, you discussed that already, but in the pending leases and contracts, that was listed, the operating budget as a source of
Yes.
funding, and it should have been capital budget.
That's correct, I'm sorry.
So if you look at this one-page schedule entitled GA Building Summary, that will come out of the $476,000, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's going to come from operating, is that what you said?
No, it's coming
Mr.
from
Dent?
capital.
Going to
Capital.
It says
Thank you.
on the sheet,
Okay.
it says
Okay,
operating.
Says
thank you.
operating.
But it was incorrect. All right, and now you have to remember that most of that remaining budget, 360,000 of it is essentially liquidated damages.
Yes.
Money that we haven't paid, so whether that all works out remains to be seen. All right, thank you.
Move on to finance.
Move on to finance.
We met with the FAA last week regarding the 5-year capital improvement program with FAA and DOT, and it's included in your handout. This coming federal fiscal year, we're looking at grants for a snow blower, the tools for the ARF truck, and ramp rehabilitation. The ramp rehabilitation section has been increased up to, I believe, $1.5 million, and that was primarily because of some carryover money that we had from previous year. So they suggested that we put it towards the ramp rehabilitation. On the, what I will call internal capital request with town, I sent back to Libby. She requested an update. I sent it back to her today. What we had proposed for the EIR, the environmental work associated with projects, will be reduced. We had put in $500,000 in 16, but because we have a prior appropriation of $450,000 from the environmental stewardship, we will only need $300,000 to get to the difference, which is in the CIP of $750,000. Is that clear?
Say it again,
The bottom
please.
line is we're reducing our FY16 request from 500 to 300 because of a prior appropriation. We have some funding from a prior appropriation
Okay.
for that.
Right.
So we don't need as much as we thought we needed.
So it's going to be, you only need, what, the bottom line, did you say?
300,000. It will need
300 instead of 500.
Thank you. Okay.
Additionally, we are looking to acquire the utility vehicle sooner if, in fact, the treasurer agrees that through a prior appropriation, we can do that. So we're anticipating being able to do that, and that could eliminate the request that we have in for 16. And what we're in the process of setting up a meeting with the town treasurer to verify these things, because we found monies from prior projects that were left over. And there's one that we're going to see if we can turn back as opposed to reappropriate, and that was from the taxiway Delta/Juliet project. There's about $150-some thousand there. And if we can't turn it back, we will look to reappropriate to other accounts to reduce our current levels. So that's primarily what we're going to be meeting with the treasurer on.
Any questions?
I will tell you, it gets very confusing between federal fiscal years, calendar years, and state and our fiscal years. So this big sheet, it's color-coded, and it's very good that it's color-coded because we just refer the different colors. But the same essential program capital, we're focusing on rehabilitating the ramp, expanding some of the ramp, and back to rehabilitating the ramp with some safety and security items in between. So, on the master plan, we have a meeting this Friday with the consultant to go over the updated CIP and how that will be integrated into the matrix that you had previously seen that was formulated from the master plan draft of Chapter 7, essentially looking at that, prioritizing it, and then determining from there what the specific focus of the financial feasibility chapter, Chapter 8, will be. So we're hoping to, after this meeting, finalize Chapter 7. We will then have a subcommittee meeting with the commissioners, and then another advisory committee meeting, and finalize 7. But again, we're in the process now of just rounding up and honing in on what the financial feasibility will be. Rather than give them a shotgun approach to all projects, we want them to focus in on what we believe to be the realistic projects over the next 5 to 10 years. So that is going to be happening this Friday. Any questions on that?
And you'll hopefully come out of that meeting with some dates.
Yes, dates for the subcommittee and advisory committee meeting.
Thank you.
Ready to go into the report?
I am. Unless there are questions.
First,
Hearing none, move forward, please.
the project updates. The control tower. We had a conference call on yesterday, Monday, and as you may recall, the revised estimate is still about $800,000 to $900,000 over budget. And when I say over budget, over a budget that would allow for some level of contingency in the $200,000 to $400,000 range, let's say. And in the follow-up conference call, they were looking, the FAA was looking at add alternates, but they're only adding up to $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and it wasn't getting anywhere close to where we needed to be. So we all agreed that we need to look at a de-scoping effort and what it is we can cut out completely. Now, it's a bit of a domino effect here. One of the key components is an ADA requirement of a lift and modification to the stairwell. That's not necessarily a significant driver of money, but once you do that, it tumbles other areas that require work, that, you know, you have to move a bathroom, then you have to move something else and something else. And it adds a very significant amount by having to do those things. The lady from the FAA brought up a very good point. She said, if we de-scope and put our focus on the third floor and the tower cab, which really the focus needs to be, I think, on the cab if we have limited money. Her point was that then there's no handicap access to that now. So the job is focusing on an area where the handicap access may not be applicable, so we may be able to get a waiver because of its existing condition. I know we're all concerned about ADA, but essentially the way it would look is if we had to do that, we would be putting a lot of money into the areas of the tower that aren't necessarily used all the time and aren't critical for air traffic. So we agreed on two things. We agreed that Jacobs would go back and look at a de-scoping, and they have done that and sent us the update, and it brings it down to the $2 million goal that we're looking at that gives us sufficient funding, we believe, hopefully, with contingency, to be able to get the project accomplished. The other thing is the FAA was going to go back to their folks and check to see what is driving the ADA requirement, and, you know, are there ways to accomplish it, whether it be through their funding or can we get a waiver, do we need to do it? So they're looking into what can be done on that aspect. We have another conference call set up for 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, but we're all getting very concerned about timing. You know, if we need to turn the consultant loose if they're going to do a de-scoping. That's going to add another week in itself to the project. So we have to make a decision very quickly here. And it's looking as though if we can do the de-scoping, if we can proceed with the stairwell as is, we can then address the asbestos issues, some HVAC issues, the tower cab, and some of the amenities on the third floor, and get essentially the main things that we need. Yes, we'd all like to have more, but unfortunately we don't have the money and we don't have the time. So that's where it stands. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
May I urge you to, have you been getting in touch with Mass ADA, Tom Hopkins? Because I know I'm on the Commission for Disability, and we've had people come thinking that they don't need to do certain things, so then they have to go, either come to us for a variance, or they have to go to the Massachusetts ADA, and I do not want us to fall into that we're going to.
No, my understanding was that was the process. We were going to first check with the FAA to see what their thoughts were. Then we have to go to the state because they're the ones that would be, you know, approving or yay or nay. They give the up or down. So.
And they may have suggestions. I know there's one building that we're doing that was, they had to put in an elevator, but it was not one that you could walk straight out. It was one that you could turn. So there may be something that they could suggest that might make it applicable for.
The first step, as I said, is the FAA because of the lease we have with them.
Yeah.
They're going to review that and see what the potential, you know, options are, and then we have to go to the state because I believe they're the final approval
Right,
either way.
okay.
So. But thank you, we will do that.
Thank you.
We're getting really down to the wire with this, though, in terms of timing.
We
know,
don't
but-
want to lose, you know, it's catch-22. We don't have enough money to do what we want to do, but if we don't do it in a hurry, we're going to lose the money that we do have, so.
But it might cost you more in the long run if you're not applicable, you know, ADA approved.
Yeah.
So,
And how do we know we don't have enough money?
Well.
In other words, unless we put it out to bid, we don't know what the bids are.
And I don't know if you had a chance to read the cost estimate, but it was a 65-page cost estimate. It's thoroughly detailed, and it made assumptions of if you had so many bidders and so on. We only had one company put in for the pre-qualifications, and we had to reject it because you have to get 3. So we're going straight out to bid. it's not a good sign that only one company put in the prequals, so there's a factor in there based on how many bids you get and so on. They looked at that, they looked at, when I say detailed, they went down to how many ferry trips, you name it, they looked at everything. Again, we could, in theory, get a low bid, but I have yet to see a project come in much below bid,
Estimate, below estimate.
on anything we put out here. So we really don't, but based on everything we know, if the challenge is this, if our cost estimate is identifying that it may be over by this much, and we were to just go out to bid and continue down this process, we are going to be in a situation where we might accept bids, and if we're over, we're going to have to turn right around and redo the entire design, which is going to cost much more money and more time. And we don't know that we have that time, and it's going to eat into the little bit that we even have if we were, as opposed to just going to a de-scoping effort right now. So it's a catch-22 where I wish I could say, yeah, I'd be optimistic that we would get good bids. We went out and tried to talk to contractors who are doing jobs on the island now, and we couldn't get the interest, so.
Well, there's so much going on now in the community, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's,
elsewhere.
honestly, it's a small project, comparatively speaking, in a remote location, in a bad time of year, that is a federal, somewhat complicated project. It's a little unique in a control tower. It's not something that people do every day, and they're not used to working around. So, all those factors in this detailed cost estimate, Jacobs did a very thorough, good job, Jacobs, Virginia, on this cost estimate. And we are all looking at, and there is, I'll call it the buffer, add-ons, whatever they call it, something that even if we got good bids and we go down the track and we're right on target, God forbid, we get close to the end of the project, we need a $30,000 change order. That could kill the whole thing just about. So we don't want that to happen, so there is a little buffer in there for some of that. So.
And I know I've thought about this and mentioned about the possibility of us finding housing. You mentioned ferry trips, so what's the dollars in that? Maybe if you rented a house, if the contractor would be willing to use the house, that would save a lot of those ferry trips back and forth. And I know that's a big if.
It's not only that, but some contractors even have housing and will charge you for the ferry trip. It's where they're making their profit sometimes, too. When I say this was there's a large group that is looking at this and looking at every possible way to save money, and we've whittled this thing down as close as we can. We're to the point now where we don't want to artificially say, yes, we can afford it. I mean, when we're that far apart, I mean, almost $1 million on a $3 million job is a lot of money. And we only have two, so, it's a 50% gap that we're trying to fill.
Bake
And-
sales.
What's that? Bake sales, yeah.
Howard Tours.
I wish I could say we're in a better position right now, but unfortunately, that's where we're stuck. And I really want to leverage and try to get as much of what is useful to the folks that have to operate there, with the dollars that we have. The tower cab is in need of rehabilitation. The window, the glass, the roof, it's very, very old and needs work. The tower manager's area, those areas, the break room needs an updating. So we want to try to focus as much as we can on those. The equipment room, the air conditioning system is in need of help. I'll leave it at that. And, we all saw what happened in Chicago recently with a small fire there. We have to focus on the critical elements, unfortunately. So.
And comply with our lease.
Well, and that's the tricky part is compliance with the lease, and that's why this ADA is big, because it says in there that we will comply with the accessibility in the ADA. The interpretation of that is going to be up to whom is the question. So, we can comply with the letter of the lease, but then it doesn't meet the objective of what the overall control tower is there for. Well, it does, but maybe not when it rains, or it gets too windy.
There'll be more to come on this.
Yes, as I said, we have a follow-up conference call tomorrow, but we are going to, they're looking to me to make the decision, and at this point in time, if we can accomplish the de-scoping and get some sort of waiver agreement on the ADA and accomplish the work that is in that de-scoping effort, we're going to turn the consultant loose on beginning the de-scoping process as we go down the path to verify whether or not we can formally accomplish. Jacobs folks seem to think they can make a very good argument for keeping the existing stairwell as is. So,
That doesn't mean a full redesign.
no. A full redesign, again, would cost a lot more money and
Right.
take a lot more time. And that's why we're stopping it, put a pin in it at 70%. And now we're at the fork in the road, and we're not going to do like Yogi Berra says, we're not taking it. We're going to make a decision. So rather than go to full redesign, we go to de-scoping, try to keep the time as, minimal as possible, the extension, and accomplish whatever we can with the money that we have.
All right.
Okay? So I may have to make a decision. I will let you know as soon as I do, but that's where we are, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. The next item I have is Stockpile X. We've received a notice of responsibility from the DEP, and if you were to read the document, I believe is it a handout? We'll get it to you. It reads as doom and gloom.
Is this the pile, the famous pile?
This is the pile that we relocated from Bunker Road onto the airport where we found the munition. If you recall, we removed the unexploded ordnance, but then we had to go back and do testing on the pile for the quality of the dirt, or the dirtiness of the dirt, whatever you want to call it. And we had Weston Solutions come out and do that. There was a reportable event. We reported it. We're on top of it. NOAA's working with Weston to formulate the plans, but we're meeting the deadlines in terms of reporting to DEP and coming up with our plan. But you may hear some things, because there are apparently a number of folks in town were copied on this, and Libby shot me an email today and said, are you on top of this, and is it part of the FUDs? And I explained, yes, we're on top of it, and it's somewhat related to the FUDs. It's a pile of dirt that was removed from there, so we are working on that. I just want to make sure everybody was aware of it if you hear anything.
What was the tone of the DEP notice?
It's essentially quoting a number of laws and legal requirements and putting you on notice that this is your legal responsibility, which we are aware of. Weston made us aware of that, and that's why we've submitted the paperwork that we have and why we're developing the plan and things of that nature. So,
And that will not come under the purview of the Army Corps of Engineers because it was moved?
that is ours, yes. Yep, we own that pile. That's Stockpile X.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? The security project, the contractor has begun mobilizing and staging some of their equipment, and the field work is supposed to be mostly completed before Thanksgiving, so it's fairly quick out in the field. There is another element, which is the interactive employee training piece to it, which will follow a separate schedule. But right now, there's a contractor that's contending that our low bid contractor doesn't meet the requirements of the specifications, so we're looking into that. And more to come on that. NOAA has begun working with the WPI students. They came in on site yesterday. We had a briefing with the team and their advisors, and he's working closely too with Jason Bridges and the town IT department. We may have to put up a few dollars to get it completely redone, but we're going to work through the company, I believe their name is Civic Plus, that did the town's website, and work with these students. They have a very detailed, thorough program. They're going to be doing some survey work and look at how they're going to reformat our website and make it more user-friendly. So I think it's a tremendous project and a great program that we have the benefit of. On the RFQ, RFP update, We are going to be getting an appraiser to come out to do the appraisals on Sun Island Road, and we're also looking at the airport gas station. There's some property between the airport gas station and the park that we may roll into an agreement with the airport gas station, so we're looking at that. On the tower construction, as I mentioned, we only received the one response, so we can now go to directly to bid. And Janine is working on bids for a GPU, a tug, and the flooring in the ARF building that was damaged during the event last year when the heater or air conditioner blew and we had a flood in there. So
Have we gotten all the insurance reimbursements for that?
I would have to ask Janine, but I know she has been on top of the insurance and back and forth with them, yes. And
Well, we can't, it doesn't go back in the budget anyway.
That's the whole question becomes how we get those insurance proceeds back into our accounts.
Absurd.
On the operations side, I just wanted to make you aware of a citizen warrant update that may be, or citizen warrant article that may be coming out. Mr. Barata has approached us about ownership of land around the Thompson House, and you can see on the screen his latest request is to relocate our fence line to allow beach access behind essentially the new owner that is out there on the old Divine property, Ms. Roberts. And at first I looked at this, I want to keep an open mind, you know, it's a way to get to the beach, but I don't think the FAA will allow us to move our fence line. This is what's known as Exhibit A, and that would require FAA approval, and I believe they would look at that as an encroachment type of issue. The other thing is that there is a access to this beach about 1,000 miles east, or no, 1,000 miles, 1,000 less than 1,000 feet east on Maddox-Sham Valley Road. So there is public access to that beach. But I'd like to get a sense from the commission as to what their thought is. The initial thought Mr. Barata had was looking at a parking lot on the Thompson property and access through that to the beach. The other thing to note is that the bluff is fairly steep there, and there are no stairs at this time going down to the beach. So I think what has happened here, a little bit of history, I should have started with this, I apologize. When Sandy Roberts purchased the Divine property, she either purchased or is in the process of purchasing the paper street that is right there and that frontage along the dune. So that has precluded any beach access in that area where before the public was accessing the beach there. I don't know the amount of interest in this, but Mr. Barata is the one leading it, and he has indicated that he is putting together a citizen warrant article.
Will that more traffic cause more erosion or not? I mean, because if it's going to be a parking, you don't know.
I'm not an expert, but you know, it would
People
have,
slide down the dune, certainly.
Yes,
it would have an impact on the area, I know
that's
that.
what my concern would be.
And again, as I say, there is an access just about 1,000 feet to the right here. If you were to go down Maddox-Sham Valley Road, there's a public access to the beach there, so.
Seems to me the town just shouldn't sell the lots. That's the best way.
Shouldn't sell the roads.
Shouldn't sell the roads.
Yeah.
I must also, I forgot to add this, but
Let's see why that would help.
there is something,
You just stay the same. Sorry.
I have to check with Andrew Vorse. He had mentioned in passing that the parcel, David, it's above those lines, right in there, that parcel apparently has not gone through the entire process of conveying it to the airport from the town. And there is some final step that he is taking or going to be taking to do that. So that parcel right now is, I don't want to say in limbo, but it's not quite to the finish line of getting it over to our control.
I'm a bit confused by this
It's,
map.
every time you look at one of these, Dan, it's a very confusing thing. Can I have the,
Where's the Thompson house?
it is.
Above the blue line.
Above the blue line, okay.
And my sense, if I may, is that, and I don't know where the status of the conveyance
Hey,
is.
where's this? Which one?
The yellow one.
Oh. This is, the Thompson House is up in here.
Oh, okay.
The fence line, you can see, is right here, the airport fence line.
Okay.
Okay? This is the old Divine property or Roberts now. So our fence goes along, you can say, here. So the parcel that is in the process of being conveyed is inside the fence and outside the fence. This is the paper street, and this is a section that they sold off down here. I believe this was another paper street, I think.
And they've already sold it, correct?
I don't know if this has been sold. I think it's in the process. I'm not sure where that stands. But it's going to become her property.
So that is the property he's talking about. Where's the water here? Down here?
The water's down, this is the beach
So
down
which
here.
piece is he talking about turning into a parking lot?
He had initially thought the front part
The
of
Thompson.
the Thompson property, because he didn't think that the airport owned that, and he provided us with information that we didn't have on some other transitions, but again, when we looked at it finally, Dan, as you say, it's confusing looking at these drawings. It was actually this parcel over here that he was looking at, and there's two pieces here. It was this one and then this second one here.
Well, wait, this is Divine right here, is it
This
not?
is Divine.
And the next one,
This is the town that will be conveyed
yeah.
to
And what's the yellow outline?
here.
Yeah.
This is where he's proposing that we move the fence. This is the existing fence,
Oh, and he wants us to
and he's
move it.
proposing that we move it in and create a walkway behind the Roberts property.
And even with that walkway, there is no access to the beach.
There's, yeah,
I know.
down here you would have to do something with the bluff or whatever. And we do have some significant erosion.
But that is he would then say, oh, they park here, how would they get there?
They would come across the front of Thompson House down this paper road, or what is it called, Russell Road, Russell Street or something. And then, I don't know what they would do with their vehicles.
Then they would park them in there.
They'd
and
leave them on our lot
okay.
somewhere. So
No, I don't quite agree with that.
Again, I think there's probably, maybe encourage the town to provide some more parking down.
Do we know whether such a warrant article is binding or only precatory?
I don't know. I guess we will have to wait to see what citizen articles are submitted. I'm not sure.
No, but I mean, can a citizen submit a warrant article which directs the Board of Selectmen or the commission to use a property for a certain thing? I'm not sure they can.
I don't know the answer to that.
I know when that's come
Question?
up, when that issue has come up before, of directing the Board of Selectmen to do something, town council has always said, no, you can't do that. You have to, it's an expression of desire, wish, advice, if you will, to the Board of Selectmen. But I think it's worth asking the question.
What if the FAA won't let us move the fence?
Well, that's a whole other issue.
And this is a question that I would ask Tom Vick when he comes in, too.
Yeah.
Because he's the man that would know this, so.
Right.
Then who would pay to move the fence as well?
Oh, of course. Who do you think?
More bake sales.
So I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of it, what was happening, and, do you need this? And kind of get a sense, as I say, I think there's access already to the area. Art, your point is well taken.
I'm sorry, which
But-
point was that?
That,
By
the
the
town needs to.
selling it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could find out what the status of the conveyance of Lot 100 is, and that's something that is routinely before the county commissioners and the Board of Selectmen, and if it hasn't happened yet, the way to sort of just let this thing all be is to simply not convey that lot.
Well, I guess the point is that Ms. Robert is going to have something to say about that, especially if they've reached some kind of,
That's
agreement.
why they have the process for
Yeah.
comments. I know it tends to be sort of routine, but they have the hearings,
Right.
So we should find out when that's all
I
happening,
will
correct?
check
or
on
if it's
that.
already happened.
Well, I think from our perspective, we ought to be prepared, just with some photographs of, particularly of the bluff there, and the fact that there's no access down. how wide is that paper street, 50 feet? Well, it looks like
There's
it's 40 there.
There's 40
I don't know
there, but it's wider here for sure. Looks like it's labeled 50.
If in fact it's still there.
Right. All right, well, more to come, I
Where the
suppose.
actual line is. So, again, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Let's see. Another item, we met, myself and Bob Tallman met with the Visitor Services folks. They are interested in bringing back the airport ambassadors, which we agree would be a tremendous thing. We get a lot of folks asking questions during the season, during winter stroll, those types of things. So Kate is going to be looking to try to do that. She proposed a schedule. Bob is reviewing it and commenting back to her. But we would very much like to see the airport ambassadors come back. And I was not here when they were here, but I heard nothing but good things. And instead of just being stationary in a counter that we can give them, they would be mobile, and they have a podium in other places such as winter or summer arrivals. So I just want to give you a heads up that that's something we're working with Visitor Services on, and I think would be a benefit.
I thought the issue when they were out there before was that they never could be found.
Well, apparently, I guess what I had heard is that was one, and they were in one particular place.
Not the ambassadors.
Oh,
Who am I thinking of?
Were there some
Right.
greeters at one point in this?
Well, they had that little kiosk, little desk set up, like a dais set up in the summer
Yeah, what they do
arrivals.
is they meet all the JetBlue flights, let people know where you pick up your baggage.
Pull the microphone over.
They would like meet the JetBlue flights, all the incoming flights, and that's why they weren't at the kiosk, and they'd be directing people to the rental car agencies, the restrooms, restaurant, things like that. So they were really good, actually.
so we
Maybe we just-
would like to work with them, and again, we've trained them. They do their own training as well, so.
Would it go to a time like Stroll?
They proposed a schedule for certain events such as Stroll.
And Daffodil
You know,
and so
it'd
on?
be just during those festivals or events, and then during the season as well. So,
Is there any possibility or any need for it to extend to the general aviation facility?
we discussed that, and depending upon times of day and the flight schedules, who's going where, there may be. But what we did discuss was that most of the folks that are using the GA building know where they're going, have prior arrangements or whatever. So, but during peak times, we may have somebody just come over and, you know, we'll play it by ear.
Did you get any indication of how many of these ambassadors would be at the airport at one time, or is that not decided or?
I forget.
Got to that point.
We did, and I asked that question, and they gave us the schedule. There would be some times where there's overlap, where there may be two, and actually, no, I believe what they were saying is, they think two per
Shift?
period is needed,
One at
with the
each-
exception maybe of Stroll and Daffodil or something.
One in each of the arrivals areas.
Yeah,
Essentially.
and so that they can relieve each other, they can cover the whole terminal, you know, everything, so.
And I know this isn't our concern. Are they paid or are they volunteer?
They would be paid, and
By the
Visitor
folks-
Services
Visitor
proposing
Services.
it in their budget, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, an update on the Don Jacobs work, the, what is it called? Compensation analysis. We're still working through the job descriptions. I had a lengthy conversation with Mr. Jacobs last week and went through a number of them in detail. He is going back and making changes and should have something to me this week. But essentially, I sent him 16, and there was an email challenge, I guess, where I only got back 10. So he's working on the comments from the 10, plus he's going to work on the other 6. So we're moving on that. Just an update, if you have not heard, on the request that we had previously for a crematorium or morgue. That group is looking at, they need to get free land, and I told them we cannot do that, so I think that they've looked elsewhere, and In the last BOS meeting that this was discussed at, the town is going to be looking for a piece of property, hopefully where they can accommodate this request. So I don't know that we have anything else to do with that. On the training again for commissioners for the National Incident Management System, we're still working on that. I got to speak with Dave Franzuto. He indicated he can perform that training. The follow-up on the full-scale exercise and after-action report, I had a meeting last week with Chief McDougal, the fire chief for the town, went over a number of items and worked through a number of different things. I just received today the after-action report, which is quite a bit of reading, but we will be developing a plan to address the items that were identified as part of the exercise. In fact, today they had a full day of training, and they were given a surprise drill with live fire, where they had to respond and put out the fire, and they did an excellent job. The group, they did a very, very good job today. So we're addressing these things, and we want to make sure we check them off so that we're not here 3 years from now with some of these same issues. I will say that one of the items that was identified was the equipment and lack thereof. We have a package getting ready to go to bid. We have the funding in place for some of this equipment, but we may be looking at another grant in the future for some additional equipment. I was quite honestly shocked to find out today that we don't have sufficient air bottles for all of our firefighters, which the standard, as I know it, is you have a bottle and a pack for each firefighter and then a spare bottle. To me, that's a personnel safety issue, and we need to address that. So we're working through it with the package that we're putting out, but there are some other items, too, that we need to just make sure we have. So if you see a capital project coming down the road in a subsequent year or so, you'll understand what that's about. Just a reminder that the FAA compliance training with Tom Vick will be held on the 18th at 3 o'clock here in this room. And Janine had asked me to try to get a sense from the Commission, Mr. Chairman, about the schedule of meetings for 2015.
I was going to talk about that during Commissioner's comments.
That's fine, okay. We can move on to statistics, and we'll go through them, but, well, let me go through them, summarize afterwards. The operations are down almost 14% in September, year-to-date down 7%.
Excuse me, have we looked at the detail of September versus September of last year to see where is is the reduction across the board? Is it all in the air taxi?
We haven't looked at that, but that's what my next move is. I did it with employments. I haven't done it with operations yet. And that's what I want to do, is a deep dive into some of these to find out where these indicators are coming from. So that's our next move, Dan. We have not done that yet. The employments are also down 5.3, and year-to-date 2%. And in that area, I did look at some of the impacts, and they're fairly significant. Cape Air is down 1,294 passengers. United down 1,400.
For the year-to-date?
This is September over September.
Oh, September over September.
Yes.
Okay.
Delta's down 715 because they cut their season short. Island Air's down 826. JetBlue's only down 20. Nantucket Air was up 145. Tradewinds was up 242. And U.S. Air was down 62. Now, overall, to sum this up, operations are down. This is not a good indicator here at all for the employments. But Dan, what I need to do is not just look at that level of specificity. We got to get into the real nitty-gritty to find out, okay, how many operations versus how many passengers, what's the average load factor, what are the average yields, a high level of detail so we can tell what is this really saying and what are the real causes. it may require a little bit of consultant effort, but we're going to try to do what we can internally to look at this, but it is not a good indicator, and it's something that we have to be very cognizant of. So the jet fuel down 5%, but still up 1.1 year-to-date, and the avgas is continuing to go down. We've done everything we could in terms of trying to make the price reasonable. There's just not a market there. And freight is up slightly year-to-date and down over September, and noise complaints are up, but you'll see there's a detailed explanation from NOAA in there. A number of these are repetitive, and NOAA has done a very good job of responding to some of these folks and educating them that, when it's an IFR flight, what that means and why they have to do what they have to do and why controllers do certain things. The objective of the pilot and the controller is to make sure they don't hit other airplanes or obstacles on the ground. So while we are seeing quite a bit of complaints, we're doing our best to investigate what we consider the most valid and address them. So that's the update on statistics.
Do we know whether for example, the 8 complaints in the second paragraph, the 5 where the pilot was operating at his discretion, whether those were all general aviation flights or whether some of them were air taxis?
I don't know. You'd find out though.
It's interesting that they're concerned about military operations when there were none.
Except the disaster drill.
Disaster drill, maybe.
The helicopters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that was it. Okay, any questions? All right. There are no subcommittee reports, I think. Commissioners' comments? You have
No,
anything?
there's going to be a tenant meeting this Thursday, and that's the only comment. The dates, were you only specifying the date in November with Tom Vick? There was not more dates?
We're going to talk about those.
Oh, okay, so sorry.
Yeah.
Forgot that.
Mr. Buscarin, do you have any comments?
I have none.
Ms. Planzer? Mr. Gasparo?
I would just also announce we're having an environmental energy subcommittee meeting on Friday.
Okay. Thank you. And we will set up one on the master plan,
Yes.
on the planning committee, as soon as we know a date. A couple of things. One, there's been some concern that council's been less than responsive in a timely manner. We don't have, as you see, we still don't have signed leases with some of our summer seasonal tenants, and their season's over. So that's not good. And I have written I hope, fairly mild note to the person who reviews the contracts at town council's office, and said that we weren't happy, and hopefully this was not a pattern that was going to establish itself, because they've been very responsive early on. So we'll see. And I didn't copy anybody on it other than Tom and Janine.
Is it the same individual that you had dealt with in the beginning, or we dealt with in the beginning?
Same
or did it
person.
change?
Well, there's
Okay.
it's the person who reviews the contracts and so forth, and he's passed off some of the work to another lawyer, and that lawyer's been even less responsive. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll improve. Meetings. First of all, November. The idea was we would not have a September meeting, November 11th meeting, which is scheduled. It was scheduled for it was scheduled for the 13th, because the 11th is a holiday. We would not have the 13th meeting. Is there any possibility we would need to have something for the tower?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so, Dan.
Okay. The idea then would be we have the meeting on the 18th at 3 o'clock. with Mr. Vick from the FAA. Rick Atherton has said he's coming to that, and either Libby Gibson or Greg Tivnan will be here. And if there's any sort of emergency action required on something else, we'll do that. But generally, the meeting is just to be with Mr. Vick. And then we'll have the following week, which is the
27th? No,
25th.
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 27th, thanks.
25th,
That's just-
we'll have a meeting.
Okay.
Then we talked about what to do going forward in 2015, and agreed that, given tonight, we're done in a little less than an hour, we can probably try to have one meeting a month. So what I would like to suggest, if it's agreeable to everybody, that we continue with the second Tuesday. But we sort of make a mark on the fourth Tuesday in case we need an extra meeting in the month. So we'll have the space and the time available if we should need it for whatever reason.
So you will reserve this
Yeah,
this
right.
room and then cancel if we don't need it?
Yes. That make sense to people? So, make sense to you, Mr. Biscarin?
It does.
Okay. We'll give it a try and see what happens.
And the only other one I had a question about was, we had a meeting scheduled for December 30th. Do we want to consider the December meetings as well? We had one for the 9th and one on the 30th.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. I think we should,
Yeah.
We really need
It's the week after Christmas. It's after
the
Christmas.
week between
Christmas
the
and
holidays, yeah. is what I meant.
It's fine with me if it's all right with everybody else.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Then we'll have it penciled in if we need it, but we'll plan on avoiding it if we can. Okay? All right. That's all I have. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we can't adjourn because it's not on the agenda.
Whoops.
I just noticed that. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Biscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? And the chair votes aye. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
He's swimming. He has a swim
Was he
lesson.
swimming?
He's swimming. Yes, he's learning to swim.
Or just swimming to learn?
Just to learn to swim. He hasn't learned yet, so yeah.
Yeah, that's what I did my kids.
I don't know if it's still true, but not all that long ago, a lot of Nantucket kids did not know how to swim as they grew up.